Good morning, everyone, and we're ready to get started. Thank you for joining the session today. My name is Srividya Kannan, and I'm the editor for Illumina, and as well as I run a company called Avaali Solutions. Illumina is a digital enterprise digest. It is a monthly edition that presents topics which are very relevant to digitally savvy enterprises. Every month showcases an interview from a thought leader around the topic of the month. Illumina also hosts several webinars, and this webinar is on the topic of good practices in P2P automation. Over the last couple of years, we've met close to about 500 plus enterprise customers, and these are pretty large enterprises. One feedback that is pretty consistently coming out in several of these meetings is that they're looking at ways to automate their procure to pay function, not only to increase operational efficiencies, but also to look at how they can make the function more effective, more operationally effective, and really lead to bring out value to the business. So, in today's webinar, we're going to showcase one such innovation or one such P2P automation best practice that has been put together by Tata Sky, and we have Mr. Vikas Kapoor, who is the Senior VP Finance for Tata Sky, who is going to lead you through the latter part of this presentation. Okay, so what are the key priorities for P2P organizations? There are several studies in this space. There is one recently done by the Hackett Group, which states that best in class organizations are twice as likely to be aligned with corporate goals, spend one third less time collecting and compiling data for analysis, and have almost 50% less cost and FTEs and up to 50% faster processes. Now, these two numbers are pretty interesting. I think 50% less cost and 50% faster process itself is something which is pretty interesting to think about. They are on average 2 times more accurate with forecasting. So, some pretty interesting analysis by the Hackett Group. If you look at the long term P2P strategic initiatives that is also resulting as a part of this study that they have done, long-term P2P strategy, so long-term being here about say 5 to 10 years, then most organizations that they have interviewed state that their goal is to standardize the end-to-end P2P processes globally. 65% of companies state that their goal is to standardize the end-to-end P2P processes globally. But what is interesting from this study also is that 20% of organizations have stated that they do not have a long term P2P strategy or vision. The good news is at least 80% do, but it is pretty concerning that 20% state that they do not have a long term P2P strategy or vision. Another pretty interesting statistic here is that 15% of organizations state that they want to move the majority of processes into offshore or low cost country shared service center. And that's just about 15%. That is larger than what we would have assumed, but this study indicates 15% only. Some more interesting statistics around what do the best really achieve. So let's look at this for a minute. We're talking about cost to process an invoice. And here, the way this is defined is that the total cost is defined as the total, direct cost minus of all overheads to process an invoice divided by the number of invoices that they process every month. Okay, so this is a pretty simplified approach to the costing because what they have not taken into account, for instance, is the activity-based costing, perhaps, to run that activity. But nevertheless, I think these numbers itself, if you look at it for a minute, it gives us a high-level indication in terms of what is the cost to process an invoice. So one thing that comes out very clearly from this slide is the fact that labor intensity is one key parameter for organizations in terms of defining or managing their cost. So if you look at, say, for a minute here, 10,000 plus organizations, right? And look at the median here. As organizations are increasing in size, defined by the number of employees, the cost is progressively coming lower. What this really showcases, perhaps, is the fact that most large enterprises, given that they are putting in place methodologies and tools to automate these processes, they're driving down costs significantly. Labor intensity itself is a key factor to essentially define costs, because the more the number of labor intensive processes, for instance manual workflows, manual matching of invoices and so on, the costs typically tend to go up. So this is a pretty interesting analysis. The other analysis is cost to process an invoice by industry. So industry, really depending on the kind of industry one is in, there are some inherent factors in that industry that really drives costs upwards or downwards. So, for instance, while a company culture and processes, of course, are elements which determine the kind of spends. On an average, if we look at, say, retailers and manufacturers from the slide, the cost to process an invoice is typically lower than, for example, professional, scientific, or technical services, or finance and insurance, information media publishing, where the costs are tending to be higher because enterprises have a lot of PO based invoices. As a manufacturer, there are a lot of PO based invoices, or as a retailer, there are a lot of PO based invoices, given that the procurement itself is a lot of direct raw material spends. Whereas there could be a lot of non PO based invoices in the other industries, which really drives up costs, essentially because of perhaps seasonal procurements or from one-time vendors and so on and so forth. So processing costs are driven not only by the size of the organization but also by the kind of industry that one operates in. The other interesting thing that I wanted to bring out here is, irrespective of the industry, organizations that have put best practices in place, that is represented by the first quartile here, have typically anywhere between 20 to 50% lower costs than organizations in the third quartile. So, irrespective of the industry itself, even within, say, for example, finance, insurance, or information media publishing, organizations in the first quartile typically have significantly lower costs as a result of some of the best practices that they have put in. So, here is another interesting statistic in terms of what the best really achieves, right? So, number of invoices processed per process accounts payable FTE for the top 25% is roughly about 4 days, as compared to, say, 14 days for the bottom 25%. So, some interesting statistics for us to think about. I'm now going to hand over to our guest speaker, who is Vikas Kapoor. Vikas represents Tata Sky. Like I mentioned, he's a senior vice president in finance, highly qualified, with more than 15 years of experience in both established and startup organizations. His core specialization is leading the finance function, managing effectively finance and system transformation projects. He has a variety of experience in gap conversion and running complex tax treasury portfolios. So, Vikas, very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining in. I'm going to hand over the presentation to you. We'll make you the presenter, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Yeah, good morning everyone. Pleasure to be part of this webinar. The slides that I want to walk you through, basis my discussion with Srividya also in the past, is how we look at finance functions specifically in Tata Sky. In specific regards to P2P automation, what we believed were the typical barriers that we encountered. There were some compelling reasons that also forced us to look at automation from a P2P perspective, and a gist of what we have achieved as yet in terms of technology updation. So moving ahead, from a finance function, my understanding of it is that earlier it used to be just hinging on two core strengths: financial reporting and compliance responsibilities. But now it has transitioned into a strategic business support. One of the key things when you look at your finance function as a business partner is that you need to have time from your regular activities, mundane activities, or what I call as the bread and butter stuff, and have some available time wherein you can contribute in a real sense to the business. And for that, you need to identify processes which kind of take time, which have governance issues, which have risk issues, and you have to have systems in place which give you the comfort exactly in terms of that, yes, things are going in the right order, and by a little bit of monitoring through automated processes, you can ensure that the controlling activity or the controlling function is able to do its job effectively. As I was mentioning, the evolution of the finance function has strategically moved away from financial reporting and compliance. So while those are there, the real challenge for finance guys is move towards a strategic business support or a business partnering role. For that, one of the key things that we have taken onus on us in Tata Sky is look at regular mundane activities which are important, which are the bread and butter stuff. You can't falter on those, and see how you can build in systems and automated processes around those areas, which kind of give you free time to concentrate on the business supporting activity. The other important thing is the board also has traditionally now moved away from your standard MIS reports and things, and it is now looking at taking one step ahead in terms of insights and everything. One of the key challenges that we have is technology has been a key enabler in the finance operations. It is proving to be a transforming agent. Not only in the shared service centers, but even smaller entities, SME players, they are also looking at a shared service model in terms of building scalability. What it does for you is basically it gives you standardize. They work like clockwork. And another key element that you are able to drive within the organization is an effective change management, which is more towards how do you bring in better controls over your processes? How do you reduce the cost of processing? How do you make finance as a key enabler and just not by words but by actions as well? Moving to the next slide, one of the key things as challenges that we have or which are typical barriers to P2P operations are first is in terms of insight and control. As I mentioned, there needs to be an inadequate AP process control, specifically on the compliance side. There has to be some sort of an insight in terms you also invoice or earlier cost of processing an invoice used to hover around 32 rupees just from an INR perspective, and today we are far below that. There is also a difficulty in terms of paper-based or labor-intensive processes. Basically, in terms of yes, lost invoices, invoices having signatures which you find very difficult to comprehend whether they belong to the right user. So, from a control point of view, these processes kind of add into your process steps. Also, another important thing which is missing in today's P2P processes is there is no integrated workflow or data management. Things that one can use technology is automating your P2P operations is getting an integrated workflow or a data management. You can integrate it with your ERP in the sense that each of your invoices is tagged to a journal entry, which allows you to access it for audit, internal audit, or for reference ever. So you are not dependent on, okay, I need to pull out this invoice, I want to analyze it and wait for the record team to send it from the warehouse, and then you are looking at the invoice. So today in Tata Sky, we have it at the click of the button. If I want to analyze a particular spend, I can look at the invoice itself. So there were quite a few compelling reasons for us to look at automating P2P. One is from a better spend visibility and control. The other was in terms of timely and correct financial reports. We had a large in terms of P2P operations, and we wanted to streamline and put them in rules. So we did that. We also wanted to reduce instances of fraud or duplication of payments, duplication of invoices, and overall improve the control environment around P2P processes. These were some of the compelling reasons that we looked at when we thought of automating our P2P processes. So from that very purpose, we looked at driving the value in the P2P processes in two ways: process governance and standardization, and also looking at technology to help us with some of the challenges that we faced in P2P. Going to the main slide, which is on P2P optimizations in Tata Sky. As I mentioned, some of the challenges are there, which are listed down on the left-hand side. What we did was is what I intend to talk you through. So from a P2P transformation, what we did is we had centralized accounting. We had 4 offices across India. So when we decided of setting up our shared service center, and it is an outsourced shared service center, not a captive shared service center, we centralized the accounting operations templates. So mind you, for a company of our size itself, we were grappling with more than 380 odd varieties of invoices, and we had to standardize them to the bare minimum of around 100 odd, which could be easily read and analyzed by open text. We looked at various options of invoice processing, basically like OpenText, Bassware, Brainware, and other processes. And we decided to go with OpenText because it kind of worked seamlessly with our SAP solution. There was a bit of challenge in terms of digitizing and automating invoice capture. Most of the companies that operate in Asia Pacific would be aware that you have a lot of invoices with a lot of supportings. You have a lot of manhandling of the invoices. Wrong and automated invoice capture really involved us putting in a process whereby the invoices could be scanned and digitized in an efficient manner, in a seamless workflow, and in a way it was legible for the system or the OCR system to read it, because there you are relying on the system to give you the numbers and do the three-way match. It also involved a lot of change management, both internally as well as externally. We had extensive workshops both internally and with our key vendors in terms of how it is going to benefit them. Like with any system change, one of the key challenges that you have is the adoption of the technology by the users. So we had a process wherein we were hand-holding the users for the 2 months post-implementation, and now is the time wherein we have gone on a real-time basis with our implementation. A lot of KPI based reporting and analytics we were able to build around our P2P optimization, and which is currently helping us in achieving process governance as well as controls around it. So what were the results? Just to give you a snapshot, we were able to bring down our turnaround time from 7 days to 2 days. We lowered around 3 FTEs within 1 month of go live. We had our systems and processes are now geared up to handle around 4 times more numbers than what we used to handle. So just to give you a fair sense, we handle around 3,600 to 4,000 invoices a month. We have much greater visibility on the outstanding liabilities and vendor payments. More than that, from a user perspective, the advantage that the user has got today, he exactly knows where his invoice is. It has been scanned, it is pending for approval, or it is scheduled for payment, or it has been paid. And if it has been paid, the data is also shared parallelly with the vendor, so the vendor is also informed immediately that yes, your payment is scheduled for the coming week, and he gets the assurance that yes, he need not call up any accounts payable guy finding out where my invoice is stuck and what has happened to it. So these were some of the key benefits that we managed from our P2P optimizations. Just in case if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer that.
Okay, so you could ask your questions on the chat button. The chat button is open. If you have any questions, just use the chat button to post them in. Yes. Can you hear me, Vikas? Okay, so we have a question, Vikas, from Mr. Sundaram. He is asking, can you brief on reducing fraud in processing?
Okay. Just to give you a case in point, see, typically not all your invoices are PO based. So while we all of us being accountants and controllers, we are aware that doing the three-way match wherein your PO is authorized, you have passed your GRN by another person who is not linked with the finance department or who is part of the user department, and then the invoice comes to the finance and finance does the three-way match and processes the invoices. What we have managed to do in terms of automation is a couple of things. When an invoice is scanned by us, automatically it is able to reflect back up to 15 months if there are 3 or 4 parameters that the invoice can be picked up, which means that the invoice number is common, the description on the face of the invoice is common, so it matches around 36 characters, which could be common between one invoice and the other invoice. And the second important thing is the value of the invoice is common. So based on these 3 parameters, if any invoice which is getting scanned, the system looks back internally and tries to check if there was a similar kind of an invoice which it throws up. The moment it throws up a similar looking invoice, it goes an escalation matrix which a person can review and say, okay, this is a new invoice, let me process it. If there is a query, you can forward it to an indexer or to the user department and take it. This happens through a workflow. There are specified tags in the system with reminders, which ensures that the user department also turns it around on a real-time basis. That's number one. The second important thing that we have done is we have built certain reports specifically in terms of where there are invoices from a particular vendor which are continuously breaching the tolerance limit that we have set in the system. We also look at elements in terms of wherein there is a lot of overwriting on the invoices. So which means that we need to punch in data. So any data which is punched in by my scanning person is automatically as a day end report visible to us. So it gives us comfort that nobody is tampering with the invoices or with the data that is being captured by the system. So these are some of the process or the fraud based controls that we have built into the system. Besides your regular stuff like no payment to a vendor who is not part of the master data, if there is gap in the master data, or a PO is created after invoice. So those are some of the things that we have built as fraud control in open text.
Great, thank you, Vikas. The other question is, what are the percentages of PO to non-PO based invoices?
Our percentages for PO to non-PO in a month earlier used to hover around 20. Now we have brought it down to around 8%. One of the key reasons why we have been able to bring it down is twofold. We constantly evaluate our PO and non-PO list after every 3 months. And in that review, we constantly look at why a particular process is not on a PO or a contractual based system. So barring the utilities bills or small travel bills, rest all the all the purchases that we do in Tata Sky are on a PO base. So that is how we have been able to bring it. Now the 8% basically hovers around utility bills. It hovers around temporary car hires by pushing those transactions into a corporate travel card. So basically it means that we have one bill from a travel card operator which comes to us as this. So thereby reducing instances wherein we are looking and reviewing manual bills. So when a person uses a cab or something, basis his predefined limits, he can charge it to the card. If he's trying to charge more to the card will automatically refuse it. So we have a control mechanism also, as well as we have reduced instances of non-PO based purchases.
Okay, thanks, Vikas. The other question is, have you put an OCR mechanism in place, and how accurate is that OCR extraction?
On the OCR side, I do have some comments. First and foremost is you need to invest in a very good scanning device which is able to handle not only do proper scanning but also do it faster. So that's one investment that you simply can't be reducing corners on. The other element is we gradually, when we did the UAT testing, we specifically did the testing at 100 dpi resolution so that the feeble written or the non-scarce looking invoices are able to be scanned. We tested it at lowest DPI. So we were able to identify places wherein we had to ensure that the systems are there in place. After that, what we have done is gradually we have built on our scanning implementation, wherein we have increased from 100 dpi to 200 to 300 dpi. As I mentioned, from a report perspective, whenever any data which is a financial data is being amended by the scanning person, there is a deviation report which gets generated at the end of the day. So we look at those deviations and try to identify which are the vendors wherein we are typically getting these deviations. And that's how we work with the vendor in terms of standardizing their invoice or ensuring that their description on the invoices is much more legible, which can be picked by the OCR. But if you ask me, in the last 2.5 months of our going live, have we found instances where the OCR has picked a wrong amount? Till now, no. And we do have governance risk GRC also from SAP, wherein scanning images are also cross-verified. So we have not encountered as yet. But as I mentioned, during UAT stage, you should do it at 100 dpi. So you identify the vendors who have ineligible invoices being sent to you.
Okay, great. The next question is on what were some of your key challenges in executing this project, and how did you overcome it?
The key challenges that we had was on 3 basic parameters. While we managed to do our centralization, we didn't have standardized processes. So when you don't have standardized processes, what happens is a typical implementation is looking at whatever I do manually, the system should do it. So you never look at the best practice that is there in the P2P space or any other activity which you are trying to outsource. So first and foremost was rehash our existing process, assuming that that process is not efficient. We looked at the standard P2P processes followed, and then we kind of realigned our P2P processes around that. Then we targeted the technology. Whatever you do, whichever system you bring in, difficulties of your past manual processing of invoices. We were looking at a very short time frame of going live because we were under a strict deadline in terms of going live with the open text because of fraud and other risk issues that we were envisaging. Due to which, what we did is during the project stage, we did a couple of activities parallel, like procurement of material, doing test scenarios, build up of test scenarios, and everything was done parallel. So we did not wait for UAT for the test scenarios to be built in. The test scenarios were built parallelly as we were working on the project. That was another key thing which allowed us to condense the time frame. And the third important thing was we had created such an amount of built up of this solution within the organization as well as outside the organization that people were looking forward to the go live of this thing. You have to create a noise, a pitch for this system. You have to constantly have engagements with your users as well as with your vendors so that they start looking at the benefits as you envisage. If there is no user or a vendor acceptance of this system, trust me, even if you do a very good implementation, it will not be successful in the long run. So these were the three challenges, and that's how we had a mitigation plan towards that.
Okay, great. The next question is on change management. So the question is, how did you manage, handle the change management aspect of?
Like typical all finance guys, we slotted our people into three buckets. We did an ABC. The ones who have less impact on business but create the most noise. The ones who are not ready to accept change. So whatever we do basis our past experience with them, we had classified them. And one of the key strategies that we use from a change management perspective is we tackled each group separately. So we never got them into the same group for one simple reason is because at times the influence of one group over the other is a bit contagious. From that perspective, we also sat and we kind of listed with each of what are their pain areas with the existing manual processing. As what we ran them through. So there was a fair amount of challenge their side. Why are you not configuring the system from this perspective and this? We also took a couple of people out, showing them how other standardized P2P processes are being done to gain their acceptance. And after that only, we kind of went around advocating our change management of the P2P automation. Another important thing which people need to bear in mind is that people do like assurances. So you have to be fine with sharing the reports, how the processing is happening. Whether they like it or not, you need to keep on sending them reports in terms of, okay, this is the turnaround time. So it's not like overnight our 7 act of processing invoices went from 7 to 2 days. There were some groups where the processing time was went from 7 to 15 days. It went the other way around also, because the person had not understood the training completely. So then we specifically targeted those user groups in terms of where they were stuck, what was the gap in their understanding of the training that we gave them in terms of the invoice approval and the workflow. And we looked positively towards feedback. So after go live also, you need to have much more engagement sessions, because that's the time when the user typically decides, yeah, I am with the system, I am not with the system. So those are some of the things that we did specifically in our change management exercise.
Okay. The next question is the system open to vendors to upload directly from their system or interface with the vendor system directly?
As yet, no. Our current implementation is not geared up for it. But is the capability there within the system? Yes. We deliberately did not do it because we wanted to stabilize the system. And in the past, we didn't have a process wherein the supplier invoices used to come directly to the finance. It used to come to the user department. So we want to take one step at a time. So that's why we moved from the invoices first coming to finance. And soon, as a part of our second phase, we are looking at a vendor portal wherein the vendor can actually send in an e-invoice or a paper invoice. And he gets a trigger mechanism that the invoice has been accepted by Tata Sky back. So that's part of phase 2. but we have still not gone live with it.
Okay, then we have one more question which says, how many locations are you receiving invoices from?
Yeah, so earlier we had around 8 locations which used to process invoices individually across India. When we did our centralization, we got it to one location, but still the invoices were being received by the user department when we went live with OpenText. So as part of our change management during the OpenText project itself, we made it mandatory that all invoices have to be directly sent to the shared service center. We allowed for a so basically today if a vendor or the user department receives an invoice and they send it not to the shared service center, the invoice is and the vendor has to go back and then again courier back the invoice to the shared service center or send it by email in place so that and you have to do that. Otherwise, people will take the system for a ride. Shreya?
Yes, okay. So I think that's pretty much, we're coming to the end of the session, Vikas. In case anyone has any other question, you could raise them now. Otherwise, you could send us an email. I have put up on the slide now the link as well as a mail ID. If you could drop us a mail, then we'll be very happy to put that on to Vikas and take his response to that question. Thank you, Vikas, for the session. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for participating. I hope the session has been useful. Vikas, you want to say something?
Yeah, Shrividya, first and foremost, thanks for giving this opportunity to share what we did in Tata Sky. Uh, to all the users and the people who are logged into the webinar, first and foremost, once again, apologies for the gap in technology intermittent during the webinar. And also on the hindsight, look at your processes seriously without any emotional attachment. The moment you are able to remove the emotional attachment that this is a process designed by me and this is the way it only can happen, I think so we are on the path of adopting technology much more better. That's all I can say.
Excellent. Great. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll try and edit this recording for you so that it is more audible. And we'll share the slides certainly with all of you. Thanks once again for participating and please reach out to us anytime. Thanks so much. Good day.